welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor, 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 neighbor.
The hell?
Here. Oh.
What the hell's going on?
We're live. That's what.
Is this thing working?
Is this thing on? You guys have stumbled upon Post-Orthodoxy, which is an interactive weekly video live conversation.
Fun.
About cognitive sovereignty, which is that you have not only the freedom, but the right to
tinker with your neurochemistry?
Well, or at least know that the thoughts that you're thinking are your own thoughts instead of somebody else's thoughts.
How do you do that?
A lot of hard work. A lot of hard work and uncomfortable scenarios where you have to confront the stuff that you were told as a child, or the stuff that you were told by your best friend, or the stuff that you were told by a politician that you really care about, or a 501c3 you really care about.
Or your trusted news sources.
So this is episode 11 of season 3. Dark and I are so happy to have all of you here today. At some point, leave a comment in this chatbot that we built for you and tell us where you're listening in from. Dark, do you want to do our disclaimer?
Yeah, welcome to the show. If you're not familiar with what is going on right here, this is a show called Post-Orthodoxy, which should give you a small clue. We talk about things that are often outside the prescribed. We talk about things that sometimes might be considered controversial.
Definitely.
Sometimes we talk about things. Oh boy, big dog. Is that our dog?
No, it's not. It's not. It's the dog. It's the dog of our guests.
Okay, good.
Do you,
hold
hurry
on.
up so we can bring him on camera.
I'm going to do it. So this show is often, we explore ideas. Some of those ideas I agree with. Some of them I don't necessarily agree with. Some of them I agree with this week, but maybe not agree with next week.
And Dark and I are very comfortable with questioning things we believe. We don't feel unsafe to find out that something that we believed is not necessarily true, but you might. A lot of people find it to be very alarming when they find out that what they thought was going on is not really what's going on. So if you ever feel like that at any point in the show, feel free to drop out, send us a message,
or
tell
yell
us what
at
bothered
us.
you, or yell at us.
Send angry faces.
We take friends and frenemies alike. And so today we have the pleasure of welcoming into the Post-Orthodoxy studio, Boyce Brown.
Boyce Brown is in the house, coming in from
joining us.
Somewhere on the Oregon land.
The Oregon Trail?
Yeah, somewhere on the I don't know if you're on the Oregon coast, but you're in Oregon, right? Medford,
Southern
Oregon.
Near Medford.
Okay, right on. Welcome to the show, Boyce Brown.
Thank you, Dark. Thank you, Ainsley. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to see your face again. I just met
Boyce
for the first time last summer sometime. I think it was summer.
Yeah, it was
like fall?
Summerish.
Yeah, but you two have known each other a long time. So how'd that happen?
Way back in the trenches of the poetry landscape of Honolulu, Hawaii at the turn of the century. Welcome to the show, boys.
Thanks. What we jokingly referred to as the children's table at the MC banquet.
That's right.
What's that mean? What's that all about?
So we used to do. I met boys at a place called the Big City Diner. It's like a 1950s style diner in Kaimuki, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. So by day, it's like burgers, fries, and checkerboard tablecloths.
Aww.
And then at night, after the last table was sort of sometimes still families there eating chicken nuggets, the vanguard of poetry, freestyle, hip hop, jazz, funk, surf, punk would start coming in and setting up and blow the top off the place. It was a really great contrast when it started, and a giant family is over there still eating their chips. And while people came in and lightning bolts went through their head and they revealed the reality of the day in prose. That's where I met Boyce.
And what were you doing there, Boyce?
I was exercising my cognitive sovereignty, which is a duty, not merely a right.
Ooh.
All right.
It's going to take it one step further.
Yes.
I like that. Always pushing the
Yeah,
envelope.
there was a bustling artistic scene in the early aughts. Not only Big City Diner, but James Lipton had Word Stew, and there were a few other prominent spoken word venues.
I was the first
It's also
winner.
part of Special Prescription, a visual arts collective of 20-somethings, 30-somethings, a few people in their 40s at that time. And between Special Prescription and the Chinatown underground red brick loft scene, art centers like On King, which Brother Evno was a part of for many years.
Hisham Studio, Studio
Hisham
One.
Studio, and the work of Stone Groove Family with two star tenders, Jesse and Gordo, and Stone Groove DJs.
Star tenders.
Yep.
Yeah, we all created Chinatown as a cultural destination, and it was just overall throughout Honolulu a very vibrant artistic scene in a lot of genres.
Yeah.
So when are you guys going to write a book about that?
A lot of our people were getting terrorism files before September 11th. It was very exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Terrorism files before it was cool.
Yeah, it was I know one graffiti artist who was run off the island because he was associated with this scene at the build-up for the protests for the Asian Development Bank coming and trying, after the battle in Seattle, which was the WTO kerfuffle in Seattle in 1998, 6?
Out there, yeah, late 90s.
The powers that be decided they wanted to have a place where they could have their meetings where they talk about how to chop up the world into digestible parts for them.
For them.
Yep. And so they thought Hawaii would be great because the hippies can't get in their little buses and come out and cause a problem. So they wanted to turn Hawaii into what they called the Geneva of the Pacific, so that they could come and work their world domination plans. And a bunch of hippies with pots had a parade and banged on pots. And the city spent $7 to $9 million on riot cops.
For that event?
Yeah, for that event.
They gotta spend that budget somewhere, or they won't get the same budget next year.
It was a very exciting scene to be in Honolulu, Hawaii, in the art scene in the beginning of this century.
Do you think you have a terrorism file, Boyce?
Well, Patriot Act made it legal, and Patriot Act is now the USA Freedom Act, which has been reauthorized in 2020. So if I'm doing anything right, I certainly do have such a file.
And we could theoretically find out what our file is, right? Like, that's what the Patriot Act means, is that anybody's info can be grabbed, so I could grab my own info.
Well, you can file a Freedom of Information request.
About myself.
About yourself.
I would also like to know how many stupid little accounts I've given my email to, like Walgreens and CVS, so that I can delete them.
My friend James Tripp, who I did stand-up comedy with in Los Angeles in the 90s, this is one of his jokes. So I wrote the FBI to see if they had a file on me. They said we do now.
Why are you asking?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, and we were, the same 200 of us were protesting Bush's wars around that period as well, into the mid to late aughts.
Yep.
But then when they became Obama's wars, the left suddenly lost interest in anti-militarism, anti-imperialism.
Isn't that so strange? It's like, I know so many red-ish friends right now who are kind of like, wow, it was really great Trump didn't take us into another war, and I really don't want to be doing the war thing as much anymore. And then my left friends are kind of like, well, but we have to. And I'm like, what is happening? This is my lifetime. You know, it's flip-flopping.
No fly in Ukraine. Send them more javelin weapons.
NATO stuff.
Let's ramp it up as quickly, as dangerously as possible. That's from the left.
Right.
Yeah.
Weird. Very weird.
Strangeness.
Very weird, that part.
So what are you doing over in Oregon there, boys?
Without giving too much away.
The main reason I'm here is to participate in the Santo Daime Church.
Oh, can you explain that to our listeners who don't know what that means?
Sure. Santo Daime is a Catholic religion that places a great emphasis on Mother Mary. And I had a Mother Mary mystical experience at her cottage in Ephesus, Turkey. And I had another vision at Mahabodh, where Buddha attained enlightenment. But in addition to the emphasis on Mother Mary, Virgin Mary, there's a heavy overlay of indigenous Amazonian influences and the use of ayahuasca tea as a sacrament. And that is a tea created over many, many days in a ceremonial fashion, utilizing the bark of a vine and the leaf of a chacruna bush. And the men take care of the vine and the women take care of the chacruna, and it is distilled in a very ceremonial fashion. And we could go into the legal background of the psychedelic renaissance in terms of science and religion as the show progresses.
I have a feeling we'll zoom in and zoom out multiple times.
Yeah. And the church I'm participating in here has 2 district court opinions against Mukasey, who was George W. Bush's last attorney general, and Holder, which was Obama's attorney general, that make it perfectly legal to utilize ayahuasca in the context of a religious ceremony under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. And another church, the União de Vegetal, also has the legal right to use ayahuasca tea in their religious ceremonies. But these decisions are unique to these particular churches and are not a universal legal allowance for religions to claim to be able to use ayahuasca tea under religious ceremonies universally. But they are important foundational stones for the use of psychoactives in a religious context.
That was like the most amazing, normal explanation of psychedelic use I've ever heard. Like,
bravo.
I feel like you could say that at like a conference in a nursing home, and they would be like, yes, if that makes, like
that's the goal.
People that have been through the brainwashing of the 70s, 80s, and 90s would probably still, a sacrament in a church for the purpose of a holy transcendental experience. I do that thing. And I'm like, wow, boys, well done. That was really cool.
Well, thank you.
I think it's important
Although
that we're
I'll tell
able
you,
to have
the
these
ceremony,
conversations.
The ceremony that I attended so far, it's only been one, was what they call a dance work. And there's 4 very simple steps, 4 very simple sets of steps that consist of the 4 different dances, but you do them for 8 hours, standing, dancing.
Wow.
And I can guarantee you I will never ride a bicycle for 3 hours the day before a dance work again.
Wow.
That'll get you into a primal place, I'm guessing.
How are your legs the next day?
I took Sunday off, to be sure.
Well, it's the Lord's Day from what I hear, so it's probably a good idea.
And there's a lot of spiritual resources in Rogue Valley and Bear Creek Valley, the area around Medford and Ashland, Oregon. And I'm participating in Shiva Bhakti Kirtan, which Brother Evno was a big part of in Honolulu, and a peer-led Buddhist Sangha and a Zazen Sangha, which I haven't participated in Zazen yet here, but I intend to, because one of the other types of Santo Daime works is a meditation work, a concentration they call it, and that involves not dancing for 7 hours, but sitting Zazen for 7 hours, or maybe more like 4 to 6, but that's quite a long time.
What does Zazen mean?
That might even be harder for me, sitting still.
Yeah.
What is Zazen?
Sitting still, breath control. And at my middle-aged years, everything's getting creakier.
Yeah.
I did sit Zazen once for 6 hours, and boy, was my back sore that whole day.
Explain Zazen, if you will.
Sure. Zazen is sitting meditation that is an integral part of Chan Buddhism in China, which then became Zen Buddhism in Japan. And it's basically sitting cross-legged for hours on end. And it's also very important in Tibetan Buddhism. And to be fair, Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism as well. But Zazen refers to sitting meditation within the Zen Buddhist practice.
So it's not any particular position like crisscross applesauce or...
It's not quite Indian or what quote unquote Indian style sitting cross-legged. It's a little different to create a firmer base with your knees and legs, but it's pretty much that.
That sounds nice. I like sitting cross-legged if I have like a pillow under my butt.
Yeah.
Because that really helps my lower back. Otherwise, will get super, super sore.
Yeah, a lot of Zen Dharma centers, they understand the Western people are not that, don't have a great facility in sitting still or sitting cross-legged for long periods of time. So they'll let people use chairs and whatnot. I'll give you a quick Zen in Honolulu example. There are 3 or 4 people that I credit the most with bringing Zen Buddhism to America and the West. People like DJ Suzuki, Alan Watts, and Robert Aitken. And Robert Aitken had the Diamond Sangha in Honolulu. And I was, where is this Sangha? Where is this Sangha? I can't find it anywhere. And it turns out my ex-wife's friend was Robert Aitken's secretary. And so shortly after I started my relationship with her and met this guy, he goes, oh, you want to have lunch with Robert Aitken? And I'm, oh, what? Yes, I do. And so I participated in the Diamond Sangha periodically, but not with the regularity that I would have liked.
Mm.
And the Diamond Sangha being a particular kind of meditation or a place or a...
Sangha means a group of people typically associated with a place. Just before I was in Benares, where the village industry is burning dead bodies on the Ganges,
right?
About 10 kilometers in India, and about 10 kilometers away is Sarna, where Buddha had his first Sangha, his first group of devotees. And not so very far away is Mahabodh, where he had achieved Satori, enlightenment. So Sarna was the first Sangha, the first community of people practicing Buddhism. And so Sangha means any group. And the physical location of Diamond Sangha was actually in the back of Pololo Valley.
Oh yeah.
Where Brother Dark
used to
exercised his green thumb.
I had the only organic landscape nursery in the state of Hawaii. Thank you.
Yeah, and before I knew Dark, I lived in the back of Pololo Valley on the very road to the farming area that Dark was in, on La'i Road. We were the second driveway in. So I grew up in Pololo, which has a lot of public housing and very few Caucasians. And I also mostly grew up in Kalihi, which is both are very working class neighborhoods with a lot of public housing and very few Caucasians. So I had a pretty rough upbringing actually in Honolulu, but I still love it to death. It's too expensive.
Do they have the Punch Howley Day on Friday? Is that right? That's
Kill Howley Day.
Kill Howley, right.
But fortunately, that was only once a year.
Oh, good.
Wow.
It's a lot of effort to expend every week.
The Purge Hawaii style. So you were born and raised on Hawaii then?
In Hawaii.
I was born and raised.
On Oahu.
I was born in Kapiolani OBGYN hospital, like Obama. So, like Obama, that means I too am also Kenyan.
So I guess my friend, my daughter Zoe Mahina is also Kenyan because she was born at the same hospital as you were.
Yeah, that's the main birthing hospital for Honolulu.
Oh my goodness.
Well then,
and I'd like to say that
say it.
Obama dropped more bombs and started more wars than W. Bush. So the left needs to consider that he had a more successful career as a mass murderer and actually killed Anwar Alaki, an American citizen, and his teenage child without trial or judgment, which is a terrible precedent.
Super weird that I never saw that in the news.
Without diving too deep into the politics, because we have so much more interesting stuff to cover. Where is the left?
Psychedelia,
Can you tell
collapse.
Can you tell me where the left is? You mentioned the left, and I haven't seen them in a while, so I didn't know if you knew where they were recently.
Hang on, let me look. They're probably hiding under something. Are they under my cup? Perhaps under my notebook.
They're hiding because they care, Boyce.
No, obviously we can't really watch too much cable news or formerly esteemed newspapers like Washington Post or New York Times, even though Washington Post, New York Times, MSNBC, and CNN, their viewership are self-identified Democrats at 90%.
Wow.
Yeah. And Fox, of course, is 90% Republican. So the way that the news environment has evolved, it's tried to attract very specific demographics instead of trying to appeal to the broad middle, like, say, Walter Cronkite and the gang did.
Just telling the news.
Yeah, just calling balls and strikes straight down the middle was at least their ideology. But with this market segmentation of the news environment, those left quasi-democrat organs are all corporatist democratic sources of information warfare.
Can you give Can you give like a little delineation between like what is a liberal and what is a neoliberal?
Well, neoliberalism is a economic ideology that basically transmogrifies capitalism into a transnational corporate kleptocracy that socializes the costs to the planet of its omnicidal destruction and privatizes the benefits of the quarterly profits. And liberal, I think, is an appellation that some people call it blue anon, some people call it blue MAGA. Right. And I think it certainly fits MSNBC, CNN, Washington Post, and New York Times. So to find actual leftists, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist leftists, you need to look towards the ever-evolving new media ecosystem, which includes post-orthodoxy. Although I think you guys are neither left nor right, perhaps a bit lefty, but more focused on cognitive sovereignty. But in this new media ecology, I would look at the Gray Zone with Max Blumenthal and Ben Dixon, and Pushback with Aaron Mate and Jimmy Dore, a comedian.
Yeah, and Jimmy Dore
News
references those guys all the time, Aaron Mate and Blumenthal.
And I just found a new one, Primo Radical. He has on all of those heroes. And of course, RT, which has been lambasted as Russian state propaganda, had on anti-imperialist, anti-war voices like Abby Martin.
One of my favorites. Yeah, the Empire Files.
And one of my two favorite public intellectuals, Chris Hedges, who, in addition to Cornel West, Chris Hedges is my main man. And they just got booted off of RT. And Tucker Carlson is crazy, of course, but he has on Glenn Greenwald, another actual leftist hero, and Jimmy Dore. And MSNBC and CNN won't touch actual leftists like those with a 10-foot pole.
Well, that's why Jimmy Dore is a right winger, because he was on Fox.
Because he said bad things about certain medical treatments, even though he had those medical treatments and was in fact injured by those medical treatments. It still makes him a Trumper because he said that he had a bad time.
Yeah, and I see you guys added Russell Brand.
Yeah, Russell Brand is one of those guys that I think the jury is still out. I enjoy his show. I enjoy his analysis. He has a huge following. He's 5 million people whenever he's online or who watch those shows. Well, he also had like a career beforehand to sort of scoop his folks, bring his folks into the fold. And I appreciate the view that he's bringing up.
He does several shows. He does like shows for transcendental psychedelic people,
right,
and shows for straight up news analysis, and shows for people that like comedy. Like he has like 3 programs.
He has a production team. Yeah. By the way, we have somebody coming into the Post-Orthodoxy production team
potentially
to be announced soon.
Potentially.
So that means hopefully more and better content.
I wish I could just spout like I'm doing now, but I need a production assistant.
Yeah, so you should have a podcast too, Boyce, especially as you're exploring all of these unique medicinal experiences.
If you're interested in finding some nice microdoses of Boyce Brown, you can go to his Stone Fruit Substack page. What's the address for your Substack page?
Stonefruit.substack.com has where I commit journalism.
Yes.
You don't get to call yourself a journalist.
Yes. And I just dropped something last night that ended with the fact that the West's sanctions against Ukraine are actually pushing Russia and China even closer together, which will be the axis that eclipses the collapsing American empire. I do hope we can go into that in greater detail in the future. And my video presence is Stonefruit Media. The mask is off. The Stonefruit Media that has been jumping into post-orthodoxy is I.
So you can find Stonefruit Media on YouTube. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just kind of a holding space for now. I did some videos of my early part of my bicycle journey from the Bay Area to the middle of New Mexico, thousands of miles. But also, there's my portfolio website, www.stonefruit.media, which has my old films, my writing, my visual art, my Stonefruit word image collage, which is my ticket to heaven.
Renaissance man.
Wait, say more about that ticket to heaven thing. What does that mean?
Like Rimbaud, I dropped a masterpiece in my late teenage years. Rimbaud quit writing poetry at 19, and I think is easily regarded the greatest poet of the French language. And I started my Stonefruit word image collage at Sarah Lawrence College, a major writing, dance, and theater college outside of New York City. And just on my own, for my own amusement, but it's a work of staggering genius and heartbreaking beauty.
Yay.
No, more people should talk about themselves like
absolutely.
that.
which is available. I scanned everything in my life that's two-dimensional. I scanned, including my art, which is at that URL that you just plugged in, Ainsley.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm excited to check that out later.
Yeah.
Are there any parts of your experience with the Santo Daime Church that you don't want to tell us about?
How do you answer that question?
That reminds me. You remember before the Ollie G HBO TV show and Ollie G the movie?
Yes.
He had an Ollie G BBC show. And this was before anyone really knew that it was all a put on. But he had on some major guests like Sam Donaldson and the number 2 at CIA. And he goes to this number 2 at the CIA. What is the most secretest thing that you can't tell me?
That's it. That's what she just asked you.
Yeah, so
sorry.
What is the most secretest thing of Santo Daime that you can't tell me?
It might have worked too if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Gen X loves a good Scooby-Doo reference. I need the bumper sticker. What would Scooby do?
LOL.
No, I think the daime, which means give me, gives you the energy to dance for 8 hours, as many entheogens do. The berserkers, the word berserk comes from the Scottish tribe berserkers, who did mushrooms in Scotland and went rampaging south against the British. And when I was at Sarah Lawrence, a friend and I would take mushrooms and go run for 20 miles. So psychedelics can give you quite a bit of energy, but I think situated within a formal religious context, it can provide a substantial amount of spiritual growth and psychological self-reflection in a very concentrated time frame. And ayahuasca and ibogaine show great promise for helping addicts recover. And I'm a recovering alcoholic, and it was very good for me in that respect. I learned a lot about the psychological sources of my addiction. And we can talk about, well, maybe this is a good segue to psychedelic science. I can just lay some aspects of it out pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Ketamine is already legal for hard to treat depression.
Mm-hmm.
MDMA and psilocybin are in the final stages of full FDA approval for hard to treat depression and PTSD.
In the U.S.
In the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. It seems as though they will be required to be ensconced within a credentialed therapy environment of a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker, a therapist. That is unclear to me yet, but probably some sort of framework like that. So that one's already legal, two are coming, and LSD, ayahuasca, and ibogaine are being studied medically and scientifically, particularly for the anti-addiction properties. And ibogaine seems to be an absolute miracle cure for kicking opioids, which Lord knows we have a horrifying epidemic of addiction of that drug in America. But I don't know where ayahuasca and ibogaine are in the FDA pipeline.
Well, the good thing with ayahuasca, at least from what I've heard, is that we have a workaround until it becomes legal federally in the U.S., which is this religious aspect that, much like any other religious ceremony with edible sacraments, this has some protection with a practitioner present who knows what you're going to be going through and can guide you through the experience and help you pull something beneficial from it, rather than being like, what the heck did I just eat? Oh my God, I'm going to run around the neighborhood. It is a guided, I don't want to say professional, but like a guided professional experience, much like they're trying to do for these other substances, which have been proven to help people with heavy traumas and addictions.
Yeah, not only addiction, but severe PTSD. Yeah. And there are a number of, there's ayahuasca retreats all over the world, and especially South America. But there are a number of ibogaine clinics in Mexico, and people kicking opioids and other addictive substances go there. But a lot of vets that have very severe PTSD, which is often comorbid with addictions, domestic abuse, perhaps even, vets that are in a very horrible, horrible, dark place because of our endless war, go to these treatment facilities in Mexico, take ibogaine, and ibogaine has no use as a recreational drug and no potential for abuse, but it does force one to revisit their worst, most traumatic memories and all of their physical and moral choices, but in a way that is comforting and allows for radical self-forgiveness. And a lot of vets have said it was amazing.
Yeah.
Can you explain? Oh, he's got to do a thing.
Yeah.
Let's look up ibogaine and explain that to folks, for people who don't know what that is.
I am, yes.
I pulled it up.
Oh, you pulled it up? Because I just pulled it up on the internet.
Then you explain what ibogaine is for folks who don't know.
Ibogaine is a naturally occurring psychoactive substance found in plants in the family Apocinaceae, such as all these different kinds. It's a psychedelic with dissociative properties. Now, the word dissociative I take issue with, because to me what it seems as though psychedelics do is they reassociate you with things that you have disassociated from. And that gives people a very weird experience.
That's an interesting take on it.
They say it's a dissociative meaning it cuts you off from reality or whatever, right?
Right.
But to me, it seems like it's an associative.
I've had kind of like, when I say dissociative, I feel like that's a negative thing when I say it as well, and I don't know where I got that from. But anyway, yes. What's the plant? Isn't it like a tree bark?
Let's look at some images.
I think it's a tree bark.
Ibogaine is a root bark.
A root bark. Okay. From a tree indigenous to Africa somewhere.
To Gabon.
They look like horrible little yams.
Do you know if there is that a plant that, that's where they found it, but is that a plant that could be grown anywhere? Do you know? Like within the same...
Gabon prohibits the export of iboga plants.
Oh boy, they got a monopoly on it.
Well, there are some in Equatorial Guinea and parts of Cameroon.
Okay.
And in Gabon, it too has its traditional usage in the Bwiti religious ceremony for initiation of youth into Bwiti society and religion. A coming of age ritual. And there's psychedelic tourism there, as there's psychedelic tourism for ayahuasca in the Amazon and elsewhere. Which, I mean, there's pros and cons to psychedelic tourism, but I think most people going there are going for relief of addictions, relief of PTSD, spiritual exploration, psychological growth for very positive reasons.
Yeah, I wonder. My first thought, having been in the world of permaculture, landscape, and sustainability, if ibogaine grows in its popularity and its ability to treat things that the planet really needs right now, as people suffering less of these maladies, it makes me worry for the plant. So it feels like I would like to see, I was just wondering if there are people who are propagating the plant in a way that is sustainable so that we can harvest it for this thing versus people running out and chopping down all the trees to get their root and chopping us off from that medicine. But I don't know much about that, or if you do.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I've looked into it. You can buy plants in Cameroon.
Okay.
And I have grown ayahuasca and 2 types of chacruna myself. And I was given the kuleana, that's Hawaiian for responsibility, for the ayahuasca and the chacruna. The provenance went like this: from an Ecuadorian Amazonian shaman to Schulman, one of the main Western pharmacologist experts, ethnopharmacology of all psychedelic plants, to the ayahuasquero, a brewer who had a PhD in ethnopharmacology, to me. And his attitude was that he didn't have land, but to give ayahuasca and chacruna to people that did, with the idea of propagating the growth and cultivation of ayahuasca and chacruna for exactly what you said, Dark, for the fact that it is desperately needed as an invaluable mode of consciousness now, as global capitalism teeters on the brink of collapse and industrial civilization itself teeters on the brink of collapse in a slow series of cascading shocks of geopolitics, macrostructural economics, and ecological collapse. It's coming. So we need these sacred medicines to gird our loins, to enable us to create communities. And what the Wobbly said, y'all are in a strong labor town, Wobbly said to build a new world in the shell of the old. And certainly all psychedelic medicines used correctly and appropriately are an indispensable part of that mission. And that's why I did look up if iboga plants are available for purchase, and it would appear that they are in Cameroon. So that sounds like a field trip for us one day down the road, Mr. Sevier.
When I lived in an undisclosed location on the island of Oahu, I lived in a Vietnam War era, Korean War era tent, like a 18 by 18 foot tent with ayahuasca vines creeping all over it. My tent was actually on the location where people were conducting ayahuasca circles for a period of time. So I was tending vines outside my tent for a long time when I was in Hawaii. We were also growing the chacruna bush all on the same location. So I've had a long relationship. I had a long relationship with the vine, the ayahuasca vine, and the chacruna plant before I ever did it myself. And I just fell in love with the plant of ayahuasca because it grows fast.
Yes.
And I have this dream. This is the dream. If anybody wants to throw some money at Post-Orthodoxy so I can realize this dream, like quick $50,000, $60,000. We could, ayahuasca has this unique, it grows like rope. So it has strands within strands within strands, and it looks like rope when you cross-section it.
Very curly.
And when the vines cross each other, they fuse together. So I have this dream of patio furniture made out of ayahuasca that has grown into shape. You make the ayahuasca, you shape the ayahuasca into a shape of some form,
a
sculpture
throne.
or a throne, and then you just let it fuse itself together. Chop it off and then have a cup of tea and sit in it. That's my dream. If anybody wants to support that, you can find us at postorthodoxy.com. We have a subscription link.
Chip in to send Boyce and Dark to
Cameroon.
Yes, to look into, make sure that the Ibogaine source is to check out its sustainability and
fair
see
trade,
if there's anything we can do for the plant.
Ethical.
Yeah, and done with all utmost respect to the Bwiti and whatever support they and plant medicine need for us to, in good conscience, take it to another continent, because that is its natural home. But our objective would only be to enhance our cognitive sovereignty, spiritual growth, and
thereby improve the wellness of the planet around us.
Right. And it's the first world doing the most damage. So it's the first world that needs the help the most.
I agree. I've had this theory a long time about different plant intelligences and how some plants have taken over the world. For example, marijuana, which came from a very few isolated areas in the world, but somehow is living in people's basements rent-free. Like the plant has done a great job.
Yeah, marijuana's doing fine.
Of moving all around the planet and extending its territory. So I don't necessarily think taking it out of its home place is necessarily a terrible thing.
I don't either.
Let the originals be the original, but let's see where the plant wants to go and where it wants to thrive. Because I know that marijuana is thriving in all kinds of unlikely places right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So can we speak a little bit to members of our audience who may have a loved one, who was raised under the deep, deep brainwashing in the U.S. of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where they basically bitch slapped anybody who was talking about anything outside of for-profit pharmaceutical medication with the concept that if you take any of these things, you will probably quit your job, rape your best friend, and jump out of a moving vehicle. Because there are people who, they heard all those things, they got imprinted with it.
I heard those things.
Like they got imprinted with the concept that that JFK was murdered from behind.
The magic bullet, yes.
Yeah, and so they just, and then they haven't heard anything since then, So how can we're talking about this very, this is a very clinical conversation about the benefits of these other substances we should have access to. We have the right to have access to. Like what you put in your body is not a crime and should not be a crime, because a crime is inherently something that is causing harm to someone else. But we have criminalized what you do with your body instead of the consequences of what you might do while having put something in your body, such as like drunk driving. You should not get drunk and then drive in a situation where you might hurt someone else. That's a crime. You getting drunk, however, is not a crime, and it should be that way with anything else that you decide to put in your body, because that's not the definition of a crime. But can we talk about how do we reintroduce these conversations into society? How do we help people heal from the mentality that they got in their youth, and they're just like, this is just the way it is.
I suggest
people that do marijuana are bad. Acid is for my youth, oh, I haven't done acid mushrooms in 30 years. That was what, I grew up, and I'm like, what?
I think a good intro for people would be to get familiar with the works of Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks.
Not a good intro. He's excessively.
No, I think he's a great intro.
He's crazy.
And Terrence McKenna.
And Terrence McKenna,
was
absolutely.
like the intro.
And Terrence McKenna's brother, Dennis McKenna, who has a PhD in ethnopharmacology.
Paul Stamets.
Paul Stamets. I say Bill Hicks because I think it's important to laugh. And Bill Hicks says, why are things like nicotine and alcohol legal, which do absolutely nothing for you, and drugs that open your eyes up to see how you're being fucked every day of your life are illegal?
Wow, you sound just like him.
Yeah. So I've only listened to those albums like 30 times.
Personal hero right there.
Yes.
Mine too.
I think there's different pathways for people to come to this. This is a pathway. This is a very calm, sober. Look, he has a collar on his shirt. This is serious.
Yeah.
This is a button-down Oxford shirt.
Yeah.
Come on.
I'm putting on the costume of respectability to talk about psychedelic drugs and cognitive sovereignty.
We appreciate that.
That's
I put on a white collar shirt for whenever I did.
Don't these glasses make me look intellectual as well?
You look like you know
So
what you're talking
smart.
about, and you probably care.
Yeah. Forget the fact that I have 2 masters and a PhD. It's all in the glasses.
And the collar.
I don't even have lenses.
The collar.
I don't even have lenses in these things. I just wear it for the cachet.
That's not true.
This might be a good moment for me to do a 2 or 3 minute journey of the legal history of prohibition and how the psychedelic renaissance has launched.
Break it down.
Wow,
Break it down.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Nixon said that Timothy Leary was the most dangerous man in America because people that turned on, tuned in, and dropped out would no longer fight his war in Southeast Asia. Not just Vietnam, but Cambodia, where we killed 300,000 people, and Laos, where we dropped more ordnance than we dropped in World War II. So, in the context of tough on crime, he instituted the War on Drugs, whose culminating piece of legislation was the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. That put on Schedule 1, the most restrictive schedule, such amalgamations as heroin, LSD, mescaline, MDMA, ecstasy. Ecstasy got made illegal in the mid-'80s because it was a club drug. Psilocybin, peyote, and DMT. And for decades, that restricted any psychedelic research, even though LSD was a vital part of psychiatry in the 50s. And Cary Grant tripped more than 30 times. So take that to 2000, and Johns Hopkins in 2000 had the first FDA-approved psychedelic research, and there were a number of important milestones, like 2017, the FDA called MDMA breakthrough therapy. It authorized phase 2 trials in 2018. Michael Fullan's book, How to Change Your Mind, in 2018. Johns Hopkins studies in 2019, and Imperial College of London studies in 2019, and a spate of articles saying that this was a breakthrough year, that year, 2019. And then municipalities started decriminalizing psilocybin. Denver in May 2019, Oakland in 2019, Santa Cruz in 2020, and Oregon decriminalized everything, although they didn't triple their counseling and wraparound services budget.
That's unfortunate, and I'll just break in to say, like, people...
Break in and talk. I need to go get a power cord. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure thing. The first thing that people say when you say we need to decriminalize... is that, but what about the addicts? Someone's just going to have as much heroin as they want and then die. Or what about, like, kids that don't have the right education? I'm like, well, they should be getting that education, because abstinence education doesn't work in any field. It doesn't work in sex, and it doesn't work in driving before you have a license, and it doesn't work in the chemical dependency scenario. Like, abstinence education is not the right kind of education. We need to be teaching people how to understand what they're taking, what the various things they're taking will do to them, including alcohol and nicotine. People shouldn't just be going out and getting wasted in their teens with no counseling and no education, and they shouldn't be getting wasted on other substances without education or counseling. So when Boyce talks about how, like, Oregon decriminalized things but didn't then put money into counseling and education and training and test kits and free needle exchange sites, like, Butte used to have a free needle exchange site, but the Christians in Butte and other concerned citizens got together and shut it down because of the mindset that we can't be encouraging people to be doing a quote unquote bad thing. So it's this backwards. People have got it backwards, and we need to massage those ideologies that, like, if we have a free needle exchange where people who are using chemicals that require a needle can come in and get clean needles, that's bad and that's enabling and that's encouraging. And it's like we need to massage that mindset, because you're not going to stop people from doing those things.
No, but if you do that, I might be at my job drinking a cup of coffee and somebody says, hey, there's free needles. I'm like, well, damn, I should start taking heroin.
I should go get addicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
shit, free needles, totally worth it to start an addiction into heroin.
And that comes from, and I'll go right back to you, Boyce, after this, that comes from this mindset that is a largely Judeo-Christian mindset that the drug is the evil thing. Heroin will just get you. LSD will just get you. And it's like, no, people turn to stuff like this because of something shitty going on. Lots of people have tried various substances and not become hooked because they don't have a shitty thing going on that they're trying to have escapism from or relief from, those sorts of things. So It's like average Joe with like a happy marriage and a job or whatever isn't going to just go out and be like, I think I have to do heroin every day now.
No, well, if you offer free needles, you don't know, man.
Well, it's also weirdly, because it's very weird that the Christians are the ones shutting down the free needle site, because the Bible literally says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, thus saith the Lord. It's literally not the Christian's job to make sure that heroin addicts also get HIV. It's not the Christians. It's their job to love people who are going through a hard time. Okay, Boyce, back to you.
Yeah, yes. I think you're pointing to what Max Weber noted as the importance of the Protestant work ethic to capitalism and the valorization of the waking consciousness as the only appropriate consciousness for the Western individual to have.
And the glorification of suffering.
And that too, and the avowed Puritan roots of the American psyche, which do not allow for any fun or anything outside of religious observance and work. Mm-hmm. And what I think you're speaking to more broadly, Ainsley, is what's known in the medical field, in the public health field, and drug field as harm reduction.
Yes.
Let's look at
Vancouver we should be focusing
and Zurich.
On.
Vancouver and Zurich of great examples of forward-thinking cities that just have clean needles and places to shoot up that are safe. And Portugal is the perfect reigning example of a country that took harm reduction across the board throughout its whole country.
Mm-hmm. No, they have these billboards like Zoe took this drug and did not die because her friends had an OD medication in the glove compartment. Like, and the whole billboard series is so-and-so did this drug and did not die, because that should be the point. The point shouldn't be people who make mistakes should get fucked. The point should be that people who make mistakes don't die and have a chance to maybe not make that mistake again. That's harm reduction. That's harm reduction as opposed to abstinence education, which is stupid. Mad.
Ashland, Oregon has a little police cottage on the main street of its historic downtown, and there's an in case of emergency break glass supply of Narcan.
Fuck yeah.
That is harm reduction.
Yes.
That is a forward-thinking municipality. And in addition to Zurich and Vancouver having clean needles and safe shoot-up sites, let's really take a moment to look at what Portugal did when they decriminalized everything. They didn't just randomly decriminalize everything like Oregon has. They provided the intensive counseling and therapy and wraparound services for employment and housing and
therapy.
That like all the things that cause people to get hooked on something in the first place, which is not having a job, not having a home, not having a safe place to keep your stuff while you go look for work.
Yeah.
Being
hope
squeezed
instead of
out.
Hopelessness. Yeah.
Being homeless, being a vet, being squeezed out by the incredibly rapacious nature of modern capitalism and the insane, worse than Gilded Age levels of income concentration. These are diseases of affliction, as Chris Hedges and so many other towering figures say. These are last desperate measures of people who are in serious pain. And if they have access to wean themselves off of the more destructive drugs like opioids and alcohol, and in the context of support for employment and housing and counseling, then Portugal proves that it has incredibly beneficial public health outcomes. And I think that is such a promising model for the rest of the so-called quote-unquote first world. And the sooner we embrace it, the better.
I think also when they decriminalized, it wasn't like now they have to spend a ton of money taking care of the druggies. Money that was being spent on incarceration and the enforcement agencies were switched over to being able to do counseling and therapies and these other things that might keep people from becoming criminals and taxing the criminal justice system. So it wasn't like they just had to find new money. It was just a matter of transferring priorities, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And by taking the addict's life away from the carceral state, the prison industrial complex, where they just can't create a sustainable, fulfilling life because they're hooked by their addiction into the prison industrial complex again and again and again, they're trapped. And that's why harm reduction has to be the only model to look towards in the future. Which
I found the posters. They're up on the screen. It's from Norway. It's the Association for Safer Drug Policies in Norway. And you can learn more at their website, which I'll just type into the chat because it's in Norwayish and I can't read it. But it's basically like, Sarah did not die when she tried MDMA. She took just half a dose and waited to feel the effects. Thomas did not die when he tried GHB. He avoided alcohol all night and dosed correctly. Sophie did not die when she tried LSD. She'd had the substance tested and knew what it contained. That's something people should have. We should have access to testing. They should be regulated in quality and in strength, and we should be able to know how much we're taking of some of these things. John did not die when he overdosed on heroin. He was not alone, and his friends had naloxone. Rather than all the kids that do die when they overdose, because everybody is too terrified to call for help. Because
of the implications it might have on their life for being associated with somebody, or being
we're
caught.
Consequence measures to try to stop these things rather than harm reduction education.
Let's do that as a society. What do you think? We lost Boyce.
He's coming back.
All right.
Boyce connected to audio. That's great. Maybe he was frozen that whole time. You're back.
Come in mute.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I can.
Great. So I'm very encouraged.
Yeah, it's not only having safe, clean needles and a safe place to shoot up, but it's the purity of what you're ingesting as well. Because in the last 2 to 3 years, people aren't dying so much from opioid overdoses. They're dying from the fentanyl that's mixed into opium. And they're never sure how much fentanyl is in their opioids. And that has over 100.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Sad signal.
Wait for it.
I do like that robot sound that we go into. Sometimes I fantasize that that's actually, it's like revealing not the cover voice, but what we actually sound like, tuning in from some other dimension and making sounds through the meat puppets.
Right.
That might be our natural sound. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? That might be or at least it's the sound that the computer is translating us from some strange digital tune that it then turns into the sound of organic.
It's like a voice
voices.
pedal of like, do the human thing.
No, I also wonder that about colors.
Yeah.
Small segue. Like the number of people who are finding out that they're some kind of colorblind. It's starting to make me wonder, like, is anyone actually seeing the same thing in the universe?
Apparently not.
I don't think so. And I think accepting that is part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of us are seeing the same thing or having the same experience. And it's the highest level of hubris to assume that your experience is the experience someone else is having.
I accept that.
Nice.
I also am still challenged by it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I assume that the thing that I saw is the same thing the other person saw and then make assumptions when they may have been looking at a completely different thing at the same time.
It's true.
And the miscommunication happens.
And like how you felt growing up and the way that you were treated in your town growing up is not necessarily or rarely ever the way that other people were treated growing up, especially if that other person is a different gender, a different skin color, a different financial bracket than you were when you were growing up.
So it's not even just like what the person is looking at, but the filter through which the person is interpreting the stuff because of all the whatnot before.
Right.
Different than their whatnot before.
Exactly.
Hi.
Okay, you're here, but you're frozen again.
Oh.
I'm sad.
We're dancing with it.
Wait, stay. Maybe it'll settle after a second.
His true interdimensional voice. I heard it. What? It's there.
Maybe is somebody in your house playing a high-speed video game right now?
We don't know. Hey, can you go to his Stone Fruit? I sent you a link in the Messenger. Can
absolutely.
you show that word collage thing that he did?
Stonefruit.media.
Yeah, it looks like the Vonage manuscript or something.
I just love these harm reduction posters. This is what I want. This is what I want. I want people to have education, harm reductive education, and I want people to have access to testing, access to drugs that are clean, that people haven't added a bunch of fuckery to try to make more of a profit.
Right.
You know, but then I'm also leery at the same time because potentially once various governments come in and start regulating things, they might not be regulating things in like a godly way.
Sure.
How do I say that better?
I don't know.
I'm worried that if the FDA
godly way.
Yeah, I know. Godly in the truest sense of godliness. But like if the FDA starts being like, you know what, we're going to decriminalize cocaine and we're going to regulate it. Now I also still don't trust the cocaine.
Right.
Oh my gosh. All right. I will go to Boyce's art thing shortly. I have
do you have any questions or
a message. So anytime someone sends me a message on Post-Orthodoxy, I'm going to read it anonymously. So question, how come it's never religious people who are the reason for the misery and plagues that God brings?
Huh.
What do you think, Boyce?
The misery? Who's not responsible?
This
Say
is
that again?
a somewhat philosophical, ironic question from an audience member. How come it's never religious people who are the reason for the misery and plagues that God brings? Right?
Well,
there's a lot to unpack.
You guys are both victims of... Yeah, you're both recovering victims of fundamentalist religion. Mm-hmm. Which I think on balance is more negative than positive. But if you look at the religious traditions worldwide, of course, they're more on balance positive than negative. And you know what I always think of when I think of religion is what Karl Barth, the German philosopher, called the axial age.
What's that?
In 400 BC, in 400 BC, all around the world, as America, as the world, as civilization, as Homo sapiens, emerged from the Neolithic period, wisdom traditions spouted all over, like Confucianism in China, Kungzi in China, Buddha in India and Nepal, Moses in Palestine, Pythagoras and the early philosophers in Greece, it was an amazing cultural moment of sovereignty, dare I say,
Oh no.
Oh.
It was an amazing moment. That's where we left it. The axial age. Pull up the axial age.
I will.
Yeah.
Pull it up right
I
now.
learned about that. When I was going into listening to John Vervecke and his Meaning Crisis video series.
Yes,
where
that was awesome.
He did a nice breakdown of what the importance of the axial age. It was kind of where we started thinking about thinking.
So the term axial, because like this is again that sort of feeling in your mind that probably your experience is the way things have either always been or the way that other people are experiencing them. And it's for me, it was really eye-opening to be like, no, the way that I'm experiencing the world right now is not the way that the world actually is right now or has always been. So if I go out on a prairie and I'm driving around in the prairie, it's like I'm experiencing smells, I'm experiencing sounds, I'm experiencing different wind patterns than they ever had.
Right.
You know, like they didn't have these same smells and wind patterns 500 years ago on this prairie.
Right.
You know, the clouds in the sky were different. They say that sailors used to be able to navigate the planet by some stars in the daytime because the atmosphere was so clear that some of the stars actually shone through to Earth, the stars being other suns, in the daytime. Because they look back at some of the charts that these people were navigating by, and these charts are like, oh, like they're writing down the position this star would have been at in the daytime.
Right.
Not the position that it would have been at while navigating at night. Like these natal charts and records of the ship's log are where the stars would have been during the daytime, which we know now because we have fancy telescopes and measuring instruments and stuff like that. But they knew that back then because they could see some of them.
Or maybe those, the projectors on the pyramids that project the stars from a flat Earth just had stronger light bulbs back then.
So the axial age, coined by German philosopher Karl Jaspers in the 1800s, refers to the period between Jaspers, thank you, refers to the period between 900 and 300 BCE, when the intellectual, philosophical, and religious systems that came to shape subsequent human society and culture emerged. So I guess as people began being able to think about things rather than just how to live and have not rain on you while you're sleeping, then the luxury came along of philosophy and
then
music.
Thinking about problems instead of just like, now I must go find food. Now I must go eat. Now I must go. Or thinking about your individual process of thinking about those things. Like, I think that's where it zoomed out into another dimension of thinking.
So this
right?
is like the Greeks, right?
Greece? Is that what they're saying?
Greece, yeah, Pythagoras. And, you know, I've read all philosophers, Socrates, Plato.
Mediocrities.
What?
You rip these pants, you buy these pants. He was a playwright.
Mediocrities was an early American philosopher.
I'll tell you, I went and saw the Parthenon in Athens, and it was in dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces all over the mesa up there, the mesa in Athens. So I was, oh man, and it was only half an hour after it had opened, and there were already 5,000 tourists. So I was, oh, bummer deal. But then I did what I always like to do, and I just walked around, niele, as they say in Hawaiian, curious. And I found this little path around the base of the mesa. It's just only two people, chest to shoulder could walk along it. And then I saw a sign. This is the Peripatos, where I knew the ancient Greek philosophers walked. This was their pedagogical technique, to walk on the path that I was walking on around the base of the mesa that was the site of the Parthenon. So I was blown away. And I kept walking.
Think of all the thinking that has happened on this path.
Yeah.
It's chicken skin moment, frankly. And I saw this amphitheater that was very large and very grand, made of stone, ancient, deep, 100-foot deep amphitheater. And I was, okay, that's grand and large, Bluesboro Peak. But I walked further down this path to a much, much, much more modest amphitheater that was only about a circle about 30 feet in diameter, and there were only about 3 levels to sit or stand that were only about 6 inches above each other. And I saw another sign. This is where Euripides and Aeschylus and all of the early Greek dramatists premiered their plays.
To the test audience.
So, well, Dark, as a writer, you can relate. I'm a writer too, by self-acclamation.
Yes.
And to be and a philosopher, not to be where the philosophers walked and where the Greek playwrights premiered what is the origin of Western literature was absolutely captivating and more than made up for seeing the Parthenon in about 100 pieces as a bunch of fat, balding German tourists wandered around aimlessly.
That's amazing. What a great experience.
Hey, if the listeners of the show would like to send Dark and Ainsley out there
Boyce.
to confirm Boyce's story, you can always go to postorthodoxy.com and put in a monthly donation. Yeah.
They were from all over Europe and the world.
All over the world.
Yeah, it would be good to go there. I need to go more places. I tend to project out from where I am, but I want to actually start getting around the world and walking in some.
The gravity of other people's experiences.
I'm not I'm not. I guess maybe I have some hippy dippy, hooji tendencies. But I do have a sense of going to certain places and feeling what I would call. They say that when you see ants moving around, they say, how are they following that same trail? Even if the thing gets broken and you take them away, they tend to follow back the same trail. Like, what is that trail? And maybe it's like a chemical trail that they've left and they're following. And driving around places in Los Angeles, I felt like I could find these sort of human psychic trails where you could feel like it's almost like there's a residual. Psychometry was a lost art in the beginning of the 19th century, which was about everything is impressing everything all the time and retains the record of those impressions. That was a theory. And I think when you're talking about walking through the ocean, the whales do the same?
Yeah. As they migrate north and south from Antarctica to the waters around Hawaii, they often follow very narrow paths in the middle of the ocean or along the coast of South.
Yeah, I want to go experience more of that stuff. Your sound just went, oh, now it's back, maybe.
The coast
well, you could travel astrally, I'm sure.
Astrally? Yeah, I haven't bought a ticket to that yet. I've been busy with other stuff.
Yeah, I am an incorrigible vagabond, and I like to say I've been to over 30 countries, but 7 or 8 of those are the former Yugoslavian constituent republics.
Is that Russia now?
Yugoslavia. Is Yugoslavia still a thing?
No, NATO declared war on it because it provided a socialist alternative to capitalism.
So what do you call the name? What do you call where Yugoslavia
and Bill Clinton needed to establish. And Bill Clinton needed to establish his military bona fides.
Right.
So what do we call Yugoslavia now?
Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia,
Slovakia,
Montenegro, Kosovo. No, Slovakia was part of Czechoslovakia.
Oh. So wait, this was one country and then
Yugoslavia
NATO broke it up into
shattered.
a bunch of countries?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shit.
The pretext of saving people from genocide, which actually occurred. It was a horrific war.
All right, I have the covers of Boyce's books pulled up on my computer right now. Boyce says stonefruit.media/art. Below are the covers of 5 word image collage books I've made over the years. I see them as sitting at the juncture of fine art and zines. Scroll down to view and click through to see each book in their entirety. That is so amazing that you cataloged and kept this project available not only for yourself but for other people who might be inspired or given something to think about from a book like this.
That first cover reminds me of the Vonage manuscript. It has evocations of that.
Oops.
The letters are butterfly wings.
All of them? Wow,
Yes.
They are all butterfly wings. That's amazing. And so when you were making these, what were you trying to do?
Like looking at a painting. What is it? I don't know. I'm the artist. It's all up to you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful,
especially in the first one, I was trying to use advertising and the media against itself to help decode how it functioned as the brain police.
Okay. So take that.
But then the Velvet Gospels, that was in the context of a special prescription show in Chinatown. This is a callback to the early aughts. And there's one, Jet Set Hawaii, which was held at Sun 5, which was Rich Richardson's art gallery before he ran Art at Mark's Garage forever.
Mm-hmm.
Another foundational piece of the Chinatown art world, Art at Mark's Garage. And I was in a love triangle between Rich Richardson over Gallery Coe, who was one of our leaders, and I lost. But Gallery eventually turned special prescription into background decoration for her.
For
which
her
is
what?
why we all broke up around 04. Raves.
Oh, her raves, right.
Gotcha.
Speaking of zines, I was having a conversation with a colleague recently, and they brought up the idea of zines needing to come back because of all the layers of things that happen with your Facebook feed or your news media, where we've talked about this before on the show, the phenomena of like a hyperlink in an article, and you're like, oh, well, there's a hyperlink, it must go to somewhere, and then you click on it, and it takes you to another article, which then takes you back to the original article that you came from, and they're just all self-referencing each other with sort of like the illusion that it's been, there's some credential or fact check or something. And I like the idea of the zine because it's unfuckwithable. It's limited, it's free, it's out there, it's a perspective. You take it as a perspective. Get to say things that you can't be censored for in a zine. A zine can't be censored. You're giving it away. Fuck you guys. They have to see it or ignore it, So I like the idea of a zine renaissance as a side note.
I think zines may have run their course.
Yeah, it's sad.
Fight.
I think it was a particular... Well, I was very profoundly, deeply into zine. I probably have one of the largest private zine collections in Hawaii, which I also scanned, which took forever. But I looked at, especially my first few zines, as self-consciously Xerox-based before 1993, when the internet really came fully of age. Before 1993, there was no internet. The only means of creating zines was the Xerox machine. And that was... You talked about this earlier, about the origin of zines, not hippies, but definitely punks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how punks arranged their tour schedules, by finding the zines in those cities and sending off snail mails to the zine makers and getting their floor or their couch. And so it was instrumental to recognizing itself and organizing itself as a coherent means of making a living and creating DIY, do-it-yourself art, and to find other fellow travelers and comrades in arms. But since 1993 and the internet, I think zines as self-consciously a photocopy medium have probably been supplanted by something like memes, which are a lot of fun, but they're different, and they're not as integral to any specific subculture as zines were. And zines they weren't just punk. That was their beauty. They could be entirely personal, literary, artistic. It was a wide open field of radically grassroots artistic participation. And for me, the most lasting ethos of punk rock is definitely not the uniform. You can tell I'm a nonconformist by my slavish adherence to the dress code of nonconformity.
Yep.
And it's not.
Go ahead.
It's not just the music, which I love, but it is the ethos of do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for credentials. Don't wait for musical training. Start a band. Start a zine. Create your art events. That ethos has been strangled by American culture, I think, but it is the most wonderful, abiding aspect of punk and post-punk.
I think that branch of media is like a branch on a tree where there's the springtime when it's got all kinds of lush stuff on it, and then there's the wintertime where stuff falls off. And I am going to advocate for the evolution of the zine, perhaps a different fruiting, because there is so much more technology available, but then can be hacked and do it yourself in a way where you have a physical zine object, which is sort of like a literary NFT. There's only so many of these made, and ways to make them precious in their unavailability is a way to, because I can make anything and put it on the internet, but who's going to see it? How do the people that might want to see it find it? I think the zine still has a place as a sort of like NFT portal to worlds on the web that people can't find because of Google throttling and all these other things.
I think maybe it'd be worth thinking about, why do you want to do a zine? What is the point? What is the motivation? What's the modern day motivation for compiling and producing and then distributing a zine out of an airplane on your bike?
No, you hit the coffee shops and the bars and the places where the kind of people you want to talk to can find you, right? It's like what he was saying with the bands. Like, the bands will say, here's a zine, I'll talk to those people and I know where the circuit is. I think if you have a zine that people look at and they're like, oh my God, there's a circuit. And they can then plug in online to that circuit. Because that's the hard part. I think it's kind of retro to have like a physical ad that people have to pick up and find in order to find your digital landscape. Well, because it's like a secret code, because it's so hard to find like what you might want because of the throttling business.
We're specifically talking about how do we find reliable information? Like, our information is so fucked up these days. Even the aggregators that I do generally trust, say I look into what 5 or 6 different independent media people from our list earlier are saying about a particular issue, they're still having to get their information from somewhere. And like we all found out with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, how easy it is to just be lied to and have no idea. Like, I thought Kyle Rittenhouse had killed black people for months.
Right.
Yep. And that's me who tries to look into stuff like that and figure out what the real story is. And so, like, where do you... a zine is a way to feel as though at least this person probably isn't getting, like, bought and paid for by Pfizer to produce this.
I think it's an earmark worth looking at and looking for. Where do you get your information? Who funded to get the information from point A to your eyeballs? That should be just a part of... And
what's their mission statement? What are they trying to do with spreading that information to you?
You wanted to start a Girl Scouts, and now I'm thinking about a Boy Scouts, where instead of teaching you how to, like... Somebody wanted to start a Girl Scouts. The idea of, like, training girls for the new world or training dudes for the new world. So instead of going out and having to, like, spin a stick and start a fire...
Yeah.
The idea is, how do you how do you take in information from your environment? I mean, that should be a life skill that kids should be learning, especially right now.
Right.
These ideas of teaching new survival skills to kids. And some of that is figuring out how to negotiate the media ecology, because it ultimately makes up their fucking reality.
Yes, this starts taking us back to the origin story of post-Orthodoxy.
Oh,
yeah.
Geez. Sorry, sir.
Gesundheit. Oh boy, he broke it with that cough.
What do you think Boyce is going to say the origin story of post-Orthodoxy is?
Well, what we were doing, which was this like deprogramming. You were deprogramming yourself live on the air.
That's true.
Like, this is what I thought. I've heard there's another way, and now I have to figure out how to make a bridge between the two.
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I remember doing when we started.
And you've been going through some of that stuff yourself recently, Dark, with like taking a moment to actually evaluate what you think about Donald Trump.
Oh God, that's a whole show on its own.
Right, but that's what we're here to do, is like challenge dogmas even when they exist in ourselves, even when it's you thinking that it doesn't matter if you think about Donald Trump because you just sort of look down on the whole idea in general, and realizing that that's you exhibiting the bad behaviors cognitively and philosophically that you're trying to encourage other people not to do.
Right. I think it's about understanding that feeling. So I look at Donald Trump and it's like looking at poop. It's like, I know that that's a thing that's in the world, but I don't want to spend my time on it. I mean, that's how I look at it. I find him distasteful as an entertainer. He's a little schlocky for me. It's like watching a bad comic. I don't have feelings. I'm not talking about his like what he was as president or his morals. I just find his tone unattractive. So it's up. I'm trying to learn to not judge the unattractiveness of the tone in the same way that I don't judge bullshit, because I also know bullshit becomes fertilizer that grows stuff. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have distaste when I hear about Trump, and I'm trying to find a way to get over my own prejudice so I can recognize, figure out what the shit is and put it in its place so that it can become something useful rather than just saying, look at that shit over there.
I feel as though it's almost more beyond that for you in that it's actually like a dismissal. It's not even just that you dislike Trump like your liberal friends.
Right.
You actually just literally don't give a shit about him.
I don't want to acknowledge him, actually.
And give him the time of day in your brain.
Yeah.
And that is a dead end. That's a philosophical dead end, and it's not healthy.
It's created, what do you call that? Definitely a void. It's like a pothole in my cognition or something.
Stephen Thompson says, my children are already far better at taking in cyber information than I am. Do you mean that they are better at taking in cyber information and thinking clearly about it? Or
negotiating?
Like they're better at not just getting swept up by whatever thing they read, potentially? Boyce, you're back. Oh, damn it. Maybe we just got to call the show. And
he might just be sitting in meditation.
In whatever that kind of special meditation was that I can't remember how to pronounce.
The Zazen meditation.
Zazen.
This might be a Zazen.
I feel like we should call the show because...
Yeah.
Because I really, really like this topic, and I don't want to just drag the whole thing out into a mishmash of rapidly changing subjects because we can't keep our friend Boyce on screen long enough.
No, we're going to make some good chop-ups of the show for Post-Orthodoxy microdoses, which you can usually find on the Facebook Post-Orthodoxy page. If you're watching on YouTube or on Twitch... Twitch is where I make the microdoses of the show, so you can find smaller segments of the show on particular topics or particular moments. This is going to be one of those shows that's going to be really fun to do because we covered a lot of different ground, and I love Boyce Brown's articulation.
Yes, maybe we just have to have him back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we're not even getting into... This was a psychedelic discussion.
Yes.
And I think I would love to have a current events discussion with Boyce when we can as well.
Current psychedelic? Oh, current events like Ukraine and
current
stuff.
events like, the Ukraine story and all this business.
So, Boyce, if you can hear us, we're going to end today's episode and just cut our losses and we're going to have you back on sooner rather than later to carry on this conversation, because I think it's a really good one, and we just barely sort of got into it.
We sometimes don't get our show finding guests all the time because we're so busy doing production, post-production, and then the rest of our lives, etc. So we're looking for regular contributors, Boyce Brown. So maybe you can be one of those regular contributors that we can say, hey, dude, we need you on Tuesday. There's a thing that happened. You want to talk about it? Yeah,
when we get a producer who's editing the content for us afterwards, then we will be much more able to
do more
shows more than thank you. I'm doing 18 things at once.
We need a producer.
Yeah, to do more.
If you
want
to
to
help us do that,
yeah.
If you want to help us do that, I'd like to thank all the people who tuned into the show today. Who was the dude on
AJ?
AJ? Oh, AJ. Right. Welcome to the show. Thanks everybody who participated, who's watching. If you haven't been to Post-Orthodoxy.com, it's kind of a backwards way to find out more about Ainsley, also me, because you can go to the Better Time website. It's betterti.me is our website. Mm-hmm. But specifically, the Sevier's page or the Post-Orthodoxy page, postorthodoxy.com. It's the easiest way to get there. We have a subscription little button.
Yeah.
So, like, if you go out and you
pay a producer, and then we'll be job creators.
Yeah, if you go out to the bar tonight and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to have one beer. And then you have one beer and you're like, whatever, I'll have another beer. Maybe a third beer. Think about one of those beers just once a month, the price of one of those beers. How easy it is to spend $5 at the bar. To think about putting this on your credit card for $5 a month, help us get a producer and help us do more, bigger, better shows. I'm enjoying where we're going, and a little grease on the wheels would help. So thanks for tuning into the show this week. Thank you, Boyce Brown, for coming in. Sorry about the difficulties.
So sorry, friend.
We're going to do it
again sometime.
Soon and more.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you.
Thank you for visiting our Outpost in the Borderlands. Post-Orthodoxy is a project of Sevier Studios. We host ongoing, interactive conversations centered around cognitive liberty, and you can join in by catching one of our live streams on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. You can also catch each conversation after the fact as a podcast by searching for Post-Orthodoxy wherever podcasts are found. If you take value from the work we are doing and the community we're building together, you can support the Outpost in the Borderlands for as little as $5 a month on our website, Better Time. That's betterti.me. Visit the Sevier Studios page and subscribe. You can also support the Outpost by following and connecting with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and or Substack. Our Post-Orthodoxy theme music was composed by Frank Pascal, and a special thanks goes to our voice actors, Amelia, Colin, Zbo, Rosie, Gabo, Vicky, Mokai, and Tony.
Thanks for playing.
What's outside your reality bubble? I think I dribbled a bit that last one.